Hello, I'm Katie Wilson and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Hamas returns the remains of 2 more Israeli hostages but says it needs more time to reach others. Trump says he has authorized covert CIA action in Venezuela. And NATO will implement additional measures to bolster its anti-drone capabilities. Thanks for joining us. Under the US-brokered Gaza peace plan, Hamas has so far released all 20 surviving Israeli hostages, but returned only 7 out of the 28 deceased. Another body was handed over earlier this week, was later confirmed not to be one of the hostages.
Mourners gathered at a cemetery in Jerusalem to bid farewell to slain Israeli hostage Daniel Shimon Peres, whose body was returned by Hamas earlier this week as part of a US-brokered deal to end the Gaza war. Israel says 2 bodies believed to be hostages also have been handed over through the Red Cross on Wednesday, though official identification is still pending. Under the US-brokered Gaza peace plan, Hamas has so far released all 20 living hostages, but returned only 7 of 28 dead captives. Another body handed over earlier this week was later confirmed not to be one of the hostages.
We stand clear when we say this. Hamas, the terror organization, is required to uphold its commitments to the mediators and return all of our hostages as part of the implementation of this agreement. We will not compromise on this, and we will spare no effort until our fallen hostages return, every last one of them. Hamas agreed to release all 48 of our hostages in phase 1 and made the specific confirmation to President Trump, and we are expecting to see the terror organization uphold their side of this agreement.
Hamas says it needs time and specialized equipment to recover the rest of the deceased from the ruins of Gaza. The group's armed wing said in a statement it was committed to the deal and had returned all the bodies of hostages it was able to reach. Israel's defense minister warned that fighting may resume if Hamas fails to uphold the deal, a sentiment echoed by US President Trump.
Our correspondent Lou Brown joins us live from Tel Aviv. Lou, what's the latest developments over there?
Good afternoon, Katie. Yes, as mentioned, there are major issues still ongoing with the latest on the ceasefire. There are issues over the bodies being handed over. We know there were 2 bodies handed over yesterday, one identified as a woman at Nova, killed at Nova Festival, the other as an Israeli soldier. Now, US officials are reporting that they believe Hamas is acting in good faith with trying to return the remaining bodies, but Hamas is saying that they can't extract them and need special equipment. Israel says, however, that is a violation of the ceasefire. Now, in Gaza itself, there are reports that 15 have been killed since October 10th, with that number expected to rise, with reports coming out today that more people have been killed. Now, no international media are allowed in Gaza as of yet, despite the ceasefire coming in. We will keep you up to date and everyone up to date on that as we report. Now, there are reports of Israeli authorities entering the rest of Gaza as they control 53% of Gaza currently. Now, interestingly, today is actually a national memorial day, as October is a very busy period in the Jewish calendar. So that was not held on October the 7th. It is held today, one service at 9 a.m. local time and one service at 12 noon. Now, there are the regards to aid. Israel said yesterday they would not allow aid, then they would allow aid. And the latest coming out is that they are still not going to let aid in through the Rafah crossing until more deceased hostage bodies are allowed in. Now, the level of destruction in Gaza, the UN estimates that Gaza City is up to 92% and the rest of Gaza up to 84%. So it is quite severe, according to UN data at this point in time.
Now, you've been in Tel Aviv since Monday. How is the mood over there?
It's quite interesting because I haven't just been in Tel Aviv. I have been traveling to Estorot, just south and just 1 mile away from Gaza yesterday, and I also spoke to people there. But in Tel Aviv itself, Hostage Square was quite euphoric in the early hours of the hostage release on Monday, and then it turned slightly more reflective as the focus changed to deceased bodies coming back, and that's been a real sticking issue. And later I will speak to families of the hostage bodies that have not yet been released, and they are calling for the ceasefire to end, many of them, and for Israel to act upon this violation, what Israel says is a violation. That's quite interesting. However, when you do walk around Tel Aviv, there are Israeli flags, there are lots of yellow ribbons that become synonymous with this post-October 7th. So it really is a kind of contrast that equally there are a lot of people I spoke to who, through them, everyone seems to know someone affected. So October 7th, the ramification, the ripple effect of that seems to be quite vast indeed. Now, even today, I went to the shop and the cashier was telling me of how much that the mood is lifted, and they hope for a better world and a better relations in the Middle East as a result of this ceasefire. And that was also a sentiment echoed when I was reporting from Esdero itself. So there's definitely a changing sentiment, and people are hopeful, but a long way to go. And this ceasefire and the legacy of this ceasefire will determine that.
Thanks for joining us this lunchtime. Well, to other news now, and tensions are rising in Latin America after President Trump confirmed CIA operations in Venezuela, drawing strong condemnation from Caracas as well as warnings from Colombia. Trump says it's about stopping drugs and illegal migration, but other leaders are alarmed. The move has left the region on edge.
US President Donald Trump has confirmed he's authorized the CIA to carry out secret operations in Venezuela, a move he says is aimed at tackling drug trafficking and illegal migration.
And the way you look at it is every boat that we knock out, we save 25,000 American lives. So every time you see a boat and you feel badly, you say, wow, that's rough. It is rough, but if you lose 3 people and save 25,000 people, these are people that are killing our population. Every boat is saving 25,000 lives, and you can see it. The boats get hit, and you see that fentanyl all over the ocean. It's like floating in bags. It's all over the place, and it's a tremendous. We're saving tremendous amounts of lives.
Trump says the focus is now shifting to land operations and accused Venezuela of sending prisoners and people from mental institutions into the US, saying the move was to protect American lives, but did not confirm if Maduro was a target. In response, President Nicolas Maduro condemned what he called US aggression, urging Trump to choose peace over war. Venezuela's government formally protested the decision, calling it a serious violation of international law.
Listen to me. Not war, yes, peace. The people United States, from the people Bolivarian Republic.
Foreign Minister Ivan Gil said Caracas viewed the move with deep alarm, claiming it was part of a push for regime change, aimed at seizing Venezuela's oil wealth. The country plans to raise the issue at the United Nations and with regional leaders. The Trump's announcement has sparked alarm across Latin America. Colombian President Gustavo Petro warned that any US military or intelligence operation in neighboring Venezuela could have grave consequences for regional stability.
Honestly, I'm not much of a fan of the policies pursued by the current government of Venezuela because I did not recognize it. I won't get into that. But I do know what can happen in Colombia, and that is my responsibility if missiles start falling over there, or, as announced today, if a violent operation begins by land carried out by CIA agents, they say, or by US Marines, or, as we already know, if missiles are launched at an unarmed civilian population, whether or not it is part of the drug trafficking chain, because that would run counter to the United Nations Human Rights Commission's resolution, which unanimously approved the Colombian resolution.
The move has heightened tensions in the region, leaving uncertainty over how tensions between the US and Venezuela will unfold.
Thousands of protesters in Peru took to the streets of Lima on Wednesday in the first major demonstrations against interim President José Herri, which quickly turned violent. Demonstrators demanded action on rising crime, the closure of Congress and a new constitution. Crowds set fire to fences and hurled Molotov cocktails and fireworks at police, who responded with tear gas. The unrest comes 6 days after the impeachment of former President Dina Boluarte, with Herri taking office, a move that has further inflamed tensions. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte said the alliance plans to step up and accelerate its efforts to strengthen counter-drone capabilities following a meeting of defence ministers in Brussels. Rutte stressed that NATO and the European Union are working closely together with no overlap in their activities. The ministers also discussed ways to enhance support for Ukraine and to bolster broader defence amid the growing number of Russian drone attacks across Europe.
Also discussed our deterrence and defence posture and some of the ways in which we are innovating to deal with new and novel challenges, including those posed by drones. As a result, NATO will implement a number of additional counter-drone measures that will build on and expand and accelerate our ability to counter drones. Earlier this month, 9 allies came together along with Ukraine to support Denmark's ability to counter potential drone threats. I think this is a powerful example of the quick and effective cooperation that is made possible through NATO. As we speak, in the context of Eastern Sentry, we are testing integrated systems that will help us detect, track and neutralize aerial threats. Innovation and adaptation are in this alliance's DNA. In this vein, we will continue to learn from and cooperate with Ukraine, speed up our own innovation, deepen cooperation with the private sector and more.
Well, staying with defence in Europe, and talk of a drone wall is turning into one of the continent's most ambitious defence projects in decades. The idea gained ground after a Russian drone incursion into Polish airspace last month, an incident that exposed just how vulnerable Europe could be to aerial threats.
Europe is planning a high-tech drone wall, a new defence system designed to protect the continent from low-cost but dangerous drone attacks. The idea became urgent after more than 20 Russian drones entered Poland last month, shutting airports and forcing NATO jets to scramble. Warsaw says the attack was deliberate, showing that Europe's skies are vulnerable to modern drone warfare. So, what is the drone wall? It's not a physical barrier, but a network of technology. Radars to detect drones, jammers to disrupt them, interceptor drones to stop them, missiles for high-risk targets, and electronic systems to track threats in real time. All these layers will work together 24/7, creating a shield that can respond quickly to drones before they reach cities, airports, or critical infrastructure.
The drone wall is, of course, in its early stages, but the Baltic states are very keen on this, so stretching down through the Baltics, Poland, Germany is also within range of a lot of these Russian drones, and it's about integrating all of your air defense assets to work together in tandem, from ground radars, fighter jets, cheap interceptor drones, missiles, the whole range of capabilities and electronic warfare to jam these drones, all working in tandem around the clock. It's quite a challenge.
Europe wants the drone wall to be fully operational by 2027. It's part of a bigger project called the Eastern Flank Watch, which also includes an air defence shield and a defence space shield. The aim is to give Europe more control over its own security, especially as NATO and US support is no longer guaranteed. The project started with the Baltic and Nordic countries, but recent incursions in Denmark and Germany have pushed the EU to create a network covering the whole continent. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte says the plan is timely and necessary, warning that Europe cannot keep spending millions of euros shooting down drones that cost only a few $1,000s each.
The big challenge for the drone war is to shoot these drones down or take them down with electronic warfare in a cost-effective way. You just can't be firing hundreds or even thousands of $1 million or $500,000 missiles at these drones that generally cost about $50,000 each. It's hard to put a firm price on these things. It's always changing, but that would not be sustainable from an industrial-based perspective or a cost perspective. That would be the Russians imposing a huge cost on us. So the challenge is to get the technologies, cheap interceptor drones, get the costs down.
If successful, the drone war will stretch from the Baltic to the Black Sea, forming a layered shield across Europe's eastern flank. It could protect airports, energy sites, cities and military bases, showing that Europe is ready to face the new realities of modern warfare.
Global carbon dioxide levels have just reached a record high, pushing the planet closer to the edge. Scientists say that every molecule we emit heats up the atmosphere, fueling extreme weather, droughts and wildfires.
Carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere have reached their highest ever recorded. So too do fresh concerns over accelerating global warming and extreme climate events. According to a new report from the World Meteorological Organization, the global average concentration of CO2 rose by 3.5 parts per million between 2023 and 2024, the largest increase since modern measurements began in 1957. The report comes ahead of next month's United Nations Climate Change Conference in Brazil. Scientists say the rise is largely driven by the burning of fossil fuels and a surge in wildfires, particularly across South America.
Every single molecule which is emitted in the atmosphere will have a global impact. And I usually use a pretty simple comparison that if you can imagine the CO2 molecule as a small heater, which is actually absorbing the infrared radiation or heat from the Earth's surface and then flies in the atmosphere and re-emits this heat back into the atmosphere, that causes an increased heating. So the more molecules we have, the stronger is the impact on climate.
While about half of carbon emissions are absorbed by forests, land and oceans, these natural carbon sinks are under increasing stress. Rising temperatures and prolonged droughts are reducing their ability to offset human emissions.
The areas of the Amazon which are deforested, the largest deforested areas, they are, for the last 10 years when we have the analysis, they are emitting more CO2 than they are absorbing. So the common notion that if you have a forest, it should absorb, it actually needs to be corrected in a sense that it's a living thing and it's super alerting because you can imagine, as I said, the forests are taking up 25% of human emissions. If you have no forest or the forest is stressed, then there is no uptake plus a forest respiration. We need to be very concerned with those climate feedbacks.
Experts warn that recent climate trends signal the weakening of the planet's natural defences and a future that may bear the cost of human inaction.
Welcome back to A News. Let's return to those developments in the Middle East as the US is playing down claims that Hamas is violating the ceasefire deal with Israel by not returning all the bodies of dead hostages. Joining us now is political analyst Enrique Casero. Thank you for being with us. Now, Hamas says it needs time and specialised equipment to recover the dead hostages from Gaza. How is the rest of the world reacting to this?
We're watching, and the world is right now watching because the situation right now is we are all trying to know what's Hamas is going to be the next movement, which means returning the dead hostages and returning the dead bodies of the Israeli people that were abducted in October the 7th. It's a sort of a red line. It's a deal breaker, and we know for sure that Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu is not going to kid around with any sort of giving a huge margin of actuation to Hamas. So we are just waiting to know how Hamas is going to manage this situation and what the facts are gonna be developed in from now, not even from now, from Monday to. I don't think that the time period in order to release those bodies is going to be huge. One of the situations that can be possible, we can turn back to the military operations in Gaza. The other one, the situation that we've been living since 1947, in which Israel is acting as a retaliation of Hamas actions. We gotta see this because right now I think we're all on the fence on this.
And we're already seeing this, in that this row has led Israel to limit promised aid supplies to Gaza. Do you think that's a reasonable response to this?
I think it's an expectable response to this. I mean, whatever the situation during this impasse that we are living, is something that they're not going to apply any sort of any new tactic or any new measure. We know for sure whatever they're gonna apply in this situation is something not, I don't know how to say this, much creative that we already know that is on the field. So as I said before, this is just a waiting, and at some point we don't have a time range, so we don't have an end period, a date for ending the period or for ending this time. So at some point, Benjamin Netanyahu is going to say, okay, this is it. Everything is over. You haven't respect the peace treatment or the thing that we signed in Sharm el-Sheikh last Monday. So due to the fact that you haven't respect that, we're gonna start over the operations or start over the targeting or start over whatever the plan they have. Because one thing we know for sure is that they have a plan for retaliation in case Hamas doesn't respect the agreement.
Yeah, we heard that from Israel's defense minister, but the US has taken a different view in that the US government said it did not so far believe Hamas had broken the agreement by not retrieving more remains. And one senior US advisor said the recovery of all bodies could take weeks because of the level of disruption in Gaza. So why do you think Israel is taking this response if the US is playing down the idea that Hamas has broken the agreement?
Because I think the easiest person to fool is oneself, right? So I think both Israel and the United States are not trying to fool anybody with this. And if anybody has the expectation of Hamas having the corpse of those hostages, it's time to say they haven't. They have no way to recover or try to send those corpses back to Israel. So because it's quite impossible after 2 years, and whatever happened on October the 7th, is quite the probability of those corpses and those dead bodies being going back to Israel is quite low. And they know that. Hamas knows this, United States knows this, and Israel knows this. So we're just being witnesses for next phase of this agreement, or the next phase of this path, in order to know what's going to happen with the confrontation in Israel with Israel and Hamas. So. But we don't have to fool ourselves in this situation. Those corpses probably are not gonna be retrieved. Never.
Now you mentioned that the next stage then, Trump says that plans to demilitarize the Strip and build a new transitional government are underway. What more do we know about this and about those next steps?
We know it's not something that we don't know. We know for sure that Hamas is weak because Iran is not supporting Hamas. So without that support, Hamas is gets very, very weak operational level for trying to confront IDF and Israel government. Hence is where demilitarizing the word demilitarized comes on the stage, right? And at some point, we know that this is not going to be an easy task, because we know what we know for Hamas and what we know for Hezbollah in Lebanon. We know for sure that it's not just commanded by one person, or different tribes, different groups. Any one of those are trying to impose their law amongst the very same set of groups, right? So you can find in that situation is I can see is the instability is high. Why? Because you can always count with some rogue actuation of one of those tribes, one of those groups, in order to impose their law all over the rest of the tribes. So it's not a question that, okay, you know, Israel is a country with a government, the army, the IDF, and a sort of very ordered thing. In Gaza, Hamas is just a name that gathers lots of tribes, and you can control, or you can analyze, or you can't what's going to happen. But there is some point of chaos that you are not controlling right now, and Israel is completely watching over any sort of movement in that sense.
Well, thank you for joining us to provide your insight. It was great to have you on the programme.
It's great being here.
Welcome back to A News. Now, let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Russian and Syrian officials held talks in Moscow on Wednesday to explore energy cooperation, including potential oil projects in Syria. That's according to Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak. Novak said Syria is facing a severe shortage of oil as it seeks to rebuild its economy and infrastructure after years of conflict. He noted that Russian companies have long been active in Syrian oil fields. The discussions took place during interim President al-Shara's visit to Moscow, where he also met with President Putin. The third Azerbaijan National Urban Forum is underway in Hankendi, bringing together experts, officials and urban planners to tackle the challenges of building sustainable and inclusive cities. Today's discussions range from strengthening urban-rural connections to making housing more affordable, with insights from Azerbaijan, Turkey and China. Sabina Abubekirova reports.
The second day of the third Azerbaijan National Urban Forum is underway in Hankendi. Today's program features 6 thematic panel sessions focused on practical solutions for building sustainable and inclusive cities. The day began with discussion on urban-rural linkages, exploring how balanced development can support social and economic growth. Speakers included Nigar Arpadarai, Member of Parliament and COP29 high-level champion, and Katya Schaefer, Inter-Regional Advisor on UN Habitat. Housing affordability was another key topic. Officials from Turkey, China and Azerbaijan shared their country's experience in making quality housing accessible through innovative finance mechanisms and public-private partnerships. Later today, discussions will turn to mobility, data and urban health, from smarter transport planning to designing cities that support people's well-being, safety and inclusivity. Tomorrow, the forum continues in Baku, where sessions will focus on climate resilience and innovation in urban development. Sabina Abubekirova, A News.
Search and rescue teams from Turkey's Disaster Management Authority departed for Gaza as part of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. According to a senior official, Ankara will take part in a joint task force alongside Israel, the United States, Qatar and Egypt, established to locate the bodies of deceased hostages in Gaza, whose locations are unknown. Azerbaijan, Indonesia and Pakistan have emerged as the leading candidates to contribute troops to a possible international stabilization force in Gaza. That's according to US defense officials. The plan, outlined in President Trump's 20-point peace proposal for Gaza, calls for a temporary multinational force to help train and support vetted Palestinian police units. Officials say these three nations have shown the most interest so far. Washington has stressed that no American troops will be deployed inside Gaza. Afghanistan's foreign minister has wrapped up his week-long visit to India, a trip seen as both a diplomatic milestone and a geopolitical balancing act, amid rising tensions with Pakistan. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more.
The 7-day visit saw the Afghan foreign minister meeting Indian officials, business leaders and members of the Hindu and Sikh communities. Diplomatically, the visit achieved some major breakthroughs. India agreed to reopen its embassy in Kabul and upgrade its mission, a move widely seen as a step toward normalization with the Taliban government. The two sides also pledged to expand trade, boost Afghan exports like dry fruits, and make it easier for Afghans to travel to India for medical treatment. New Delhi also promised deeper cooperation in education, health, and development, further enhancing the Taliban's international legitimacy. But even as the Afghan delegation was in India, tensions with Pakistan flared dramatically. For days, Pakistan and Afghanistan exchanged heavy border fire amid reports of airstrikes. By Wednesday evening, both sides confirmed a ceasefire at 5:30 p.m. local time. A Taliban spokesperson said the truce came at Pakistan's request, while Islamabad called for constructive discussions to ease tensions. The UN has urged both nations to protect civilians after reports of casualties. Analysts say Pakistan's long-standing rivalry with India could complicate Kabul's new outreach to New Delhi. For now, though, Afghanistan is celebrating what it calls a successful diplomatic breakthrough, even as the guns fall silent, at least temporarily, on its southern border. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
The Turkey Africa Business and Economic Forum has begun in Istanbul. The event is organised by the Ministry of Trade, the African Union and the Foreign Economic Relations Board. This year's forum focuses on strengthening Turkey-Africa relations and sharing mutual gains, with discussions covering agriculture, energy, construction and digital technologies. Over the 2-day forum, panel sessions and country presentations will take place. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Angola's President João Gonçalves Lourenço are expected to participate. The forum will conclude tomorrow. Well, President Erdogan has announced that electricity production at the Akkuyu nuclear power plant will start in the near future. He added that other nuclear projects are also underway, and despite opposition criticism, Turkey will continue to invest in nuclear energy. Earlier, Energy Minister Alparslan Bayraktar stated that the first of the plant's 4 reactors is planned to become operational in 2026. Transit through Central Asian countries has soared in the past 4 years, signalling the region's growing role as a major trade corridor across Eurasia. Our correspondent Fariza Kalamurzana reports from Almaty.
Transit through Central Asian countries has surged by 70% over the past 4 years, according to the Eurasian Development Bank's Transport Projects Observatory. The region is steadily strengthening its role as a major transit hub in Eurasia. Even without direct access to the sea, Central Asia is proving it can be a crucial link in international logistics, thanks to its strategic location and ambitious infrastructure projects. Today, 80% of all transit traffic flows through Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and more than 70% of cargo moves along routes connecting China with Russia, Turkey, Afghanistan and Europe. Experts say this growth is not just a temporary spike, but a lasting trend, one that's expected to continue. And by 2035, more than $52 billion will be invested in transport corridors across Central Asia. However, specialists emphasize that building infrastructure alone won't be enough. Simplifying border procedures, advancing digitalization, and harmonizing tariffs between countries are equally crucial. In this way, Central Asia is gradually establishing itself as a vital transit link between Eurasia's major economic hubs, transforming its geographic position into a strong competitive advantage. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Welcome back to A News. Well, as the Turkey Africa Business and Economic Forum gets underway, joining us now to discuss his expectations for the event is Erhan Aslanoglu, Professor of Economics at Istanbul Bilgi University. Thank you for being with us. Now, what are the goals for the forum this year?
Thank you very much. Of course, Africa is one of the continents, not one of the, maybe the single continent that's likely to grow fastest in the next coming decades. So Turkey, it has close ties historically, geographically to the Africa and African nations, and the trade volume and the investment volume between Africa and Turkey have been growing in the recent years. So this forum and the similar ones that has been done previously contributed a lot to the trade volume and investment potentials between the African nations and Turkey. And in this forum, there are many from all over the African countries, top academicians, bureaucrats, experts, and leaders are gathering. So that gives an opportunity, that's likely to give an opportunity to cooperate in some fields, sectors, and maybe some for infrastructure projects. So it has lots of potential to develop, to improve the relation between African nations and Turkey, and we expect the forum will help to reach to that goal.
And Turkey has set some pretty ambitious trade targets with the African continent, $50 billion and eventually even $70 billion in the year ahead. To what extent is this a realistic ambition?
I guess it's, of course, it all depends on the conditions, the cycles in the world economy, the cycles in Europe and in the Middle East, economic and non-economic events. But as a whole, the trend shows that Africa is going to be one of the most populous continent in the world. Its population is expected to grow about 4.5 billion by 2100, and within 20 years maybe it will be around 2.5 or 3 billion. So this means that economic potential is great, and also according to some studies, the total GDP of the Africa is likely to move from about $3 trillion to $30 trillion. This means about 10 times higher economic activity or output in this region. So when we look at the trends, when we look at the potentials, and considering that Africa is one of the Turkey is one of the main exporters to African continent, it would be likely. But even if it's not possible within a few years or within 10 years, but when we look at 20, 30 years time, I think the probability is quite high. Both geography, history, and the current ties and the connection between Africa and Turkey through by Turkish Airlines and the investments so far that have been realized are likely to give the outcomes, similar outcomes which are predicted, you mentioned.
And what are some of the challenges to this, especially in terms of competition from other trade partners like China, the Gulf states, the EU?
Yeah, of course. I mean, when we look at the figures of Africa, EU, China, India probably will be, and Turkey are competing to be in this market, to cooperate with African nations. But what the figure says, Turkey can compete in these markets with those countries, and in the future the competition will be severe. It will be very tough, of course. But the potential, when we look at the shares of China, European Union and other countries, and when we look at the Turkey's assets in terms of industrial infrastructure and also services potential, we can expect the share of Turkey is likely to rise. It may not exceed the Chinese share or India's share, but it's likely Turkey is likely to get more share compared to other countries. And also when we look at the trend in the world economy, where we move from globalization to regionalization, and Africa, Turkey, Middle East, and this region is likely to have more potential to improve its volume, trade volume, compared to China and or United States. Europe also might be competitive in this market as well. But well, the types of products that Europe exports and Turkey at some sectors coincides, but in some sectors differs. It might be complementary, but the main trend of regionalization is likely to give more chance to Turkey, I guess, to have more trade volume and more close ties and collaboration.
So you're touching upon those key industries there where Turkey and Africa trade with each other. How could Turkey be diversifying this?
When we look at Turkey's export structure, we have quite strong diversification. I mean, Turkey could be able to produce almost all types of goods which are available, which are possible to use in manufacturing industry. So, but we are, for example, good at automobile, textile, and machinery, also electrics and electrical equipment, white goods. These are, first of all, the potential sectors which are likely to have more share in African markets. But defense industry of Turkey is also very competitive, and it's getting bigger and bigger. So I expect defense industry, the trade between the Africa and Turkey would be higher in terms of defense industry, equipments, machinery, vehicles, etc. But on the top of this, probably we will still have defense, automobile, electronics, textile, shoes, and basically those categories. And one more potential would be the tourism. As the revenue, as the income of African nations are likely to rise in the next coming decades, as one of the leading countries in terms of tourism, Turkey would be an attractive destination for many African countries also in the next coming decades.
So we're talking about diversification within the industries, and what about diversification within the countries? Is there a sense that Ankara could be becoming more pan-African rather than having the trade be concentrated to just a few countries in Africa?
I guess all countries aims to diversify the markets, not only in terms of products, but also in terms of the countries. When we look at the figures, maybe Turkey's trade volume or investment volume relatively high at northern African countries. But looking ahead and looking at the potential of southern African countries and eastern and also western coast and middle African countries, it is more likely, because when we look at the points that locations that Turkish Airlines moves, we can guess, we can think that this movement is likely to give more possibility or more opportunity to diversify both countries and products. I think probably the share of middle and west, southern and western African countries with Turkey are likely to rise.
Well, all eyes will certainly be on the forum there. Thank you very much for joining us on the programme.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a nice program. Thanks.
Well, that brings you up to date with the world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.